Hi there, this is Alana from Alana Lee Photography, and in this video I'm going to be demonstrating how we can use some digital backdrops to transform a portrait into more of a fine art type image. The image we'll be working with today is from Adobe Stock, and if you'd like to source it here to practice on your own, it's number 365412134. We'll be using some resources from the Imaginator Studio, and we'll be focusing on digital backgrounds and assets from the Ultimate Fine Art Editing Collection, which is a collection of over 250 digital backgrounds, which include old masters style paintings. It includes some tapestry type images, as well as some floral backgrounds that really lend themselves well to a fine art digital background feel. So to get started, the first step we want to do is to create a mask of our subject so that we can separate her from the background before we start adding our digital backgrounds into the image. To do that, the easiest way is to go over here into your selection tools, and I like to click on this one and simply choose select subject. And Photoshop usually does a pretty great job of selecting your subject here. We also want to include this chair because we don't want to be putting our digital background obviously over the chair itself. So there's a variety of ways you can do that. But the easiest is you can just, sometimes you can just click on it and it will click it, or you can select your lasso tool here, select your add mask tool, and you just want to, you can just lasso around the areas you want to add to your mask, and that adds them into it. You can also add the back of the chair here, and we're just doing this really quickly to begin with. We'll make sure we get her dress in here as well. And you just kind of quickly scan around, make sure there's no little bits you've missed. And that looks pretty good. Is what we want to do next is we want to go up here and choose the selected mask, and it's going to open up our new screen where we can go ahead and refine that mask. So there are a few tools in here. I like to start out with this hand tool, and it's what it does is it allows you to go around the edge of your subject. You can just kind of paint along the edges, and the areas where you paint along the edge, it kind of tells Photoshop to say, hey, look at this little area and do a better job at making a selection here around the edge of her dress. So we've done that, and you can also go in view and zoom in 100%, and you can just kind of go around and see if there's any little areas that you would like to improve. A little bit in here, and you can see that it's maybe chose a little bit incorrectly here. So we can go ahead and choose the paintbrush tool, click add or subtract. Add is going to add an area that you paint over to the image, and subtract is going to subtract from the image. So we're going to add. You can change your brush size here, and we're just going to paint along the edge of her dress. We don't have to worry about being too accurate for the sake of this demonstration, but obviously you're going to want to take a little bit more time if you're doing this yourself on a client's portrait or something like that. And we're just also going to go along the edge of this chair. And you can see I've got this set to kind of a soft edge, but you can go up to your brush tools and change the hardness of your brush as well, if you maybe want to make it a little bit harder. And you're just going to go ahead and paint over the areas that you would like to add or subtract to your mask. Now I'm going to check around her hair here. You can see that it's masked out some of the hair that we would like to keep and include. So I'm just going to paint over those areas and add those back in. And it's missed a little bit here. Sometimes it's hard with this to make a selection using the automated tools when there's not a lot of contrast between your subject and the background. And we'll just paint on like that and zoom out and have another look. It looks fairly good. There's also some refining tools here. You can play around with those, and depending on your image, you can choose to smooth your mask. You can feather the edge. You can play with your contrast. If there's a lot of contrast between your subject and the background, that one's sometimes good to play around with. And you can also shift the edge of your mask up and down, and that will just shift your mask accordingly. But for now, we're just going to leave all these here at their default, just for the sake of this demonstration. And we're going to choose output to a new layer with a layer mask. There's a few different selections there, but we want to do a new layer with a layer mask. And as you can see, it's added a layer mask there, and it has masked out the background. So that'll make it much easier for when we go in and add our digital backgrounds. Next, I'd like to start adding in some digital backgrounds to enhance or modify this image. So first, I'm going to look for a digital background that I can use to cover over this back wall here. I kind of don't like that, or the rustic look to it. And so I am going to go ahead and I'm going to choose File and Place Embedded. And then I'm going to navigate here in my computer to where I store my digital backgrounds. And for this one, I'm going to look at the Painterly Inspired collection from the Imaginator Studio. And this contains 100 different old masters style paintings that are actually curated and sourced from public domain, and they are wonderful different images that you can use as digital backdrops to give that painterly style feel to your images, and they're free to use for any purposes you'd like. So I think I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to choose this painterly background number 3, and I'm just going to double click to place that here in my document. And I'm going to just hover over the little corners by hovering over these little square points around your image that you just placed. You can just increase the size, and I want to increase that to cover over my background, and that looks good. And then is what we want to do here. You can see when we placed it, and it placed it to the top of our layer stack. We actually want to put that down below our layer with the layer mask so that it appears behind our subject. So you're just going to grab that layer and drag it down in the stack, and it puts that behind her. The next thing I want to do here is I want to change my blend mode. So right now, you can see here it says normal. If you toggle this little arrow, you'll see a variety of different blend modes. And they're organized into different sections. So your first section is going to do different darkening effects. The next section is lightening effects. And this is the next section I want to look at. It's called overlay or soft light. And you can see how it kind of blends that background image into the existing background. And I like to choose, I think I'm going to choose soft light for this one here, because I like the look that makes. But now I don't want it to be going over top of this curtain here in the background. So it's what we can do is while we're clicked on our backdrop layer, we can go down and we can choose this little rectangle with the circle inside icon, and that's the shortcut for adding a layer mask. So I'm going to click that, and it's added this layer mask here, and we're going to go ahead over to our brush tool. And with our brush tool, you have two options. You have your white, and anything that's white in your layer mask is going to show, and anything that's black here is going to be hidden. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select black. I'm going to move my opacity and flow up to 100%, and I am just going to make sure I'm clicked on that layer mask, and increase my brush size a little, and I'm going to brush that background off the areas I don't want it to show. So I'm going to brush it off this curtain here that's hanging down behind her. So we're just going to quickly brush that off, and as you can see, now we have that background here just placed nicely behind her, covering up that wall that's behind her. The next step I want to do is I want to kind of add some shadows here behind her and fade this a little bit more into the background. So is what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a layer. You can do that easily by clicking this layer with the little plus box down at the bottom. It adds a layer. When I'm painting in shadows, I like to change my blend mode to multiply. And I'm just going to go in and I'm going to use my eyedropper tool and choose something from the shadows that are existing here in the picture. So maybe we'll choose this dark brown here from in the curtain. And then going back to our paintbrush, I'm going to reduce my flow down to something like 20-25%. And then I'm just going to paint in behind her and just kind of fading in some natural shadows in behind, just to kind of give her a little bit more separation and to blend this digital background here we put in behind her. We can also move this background around if we wanted to, but I kind of like the way the arches here that were in the cathedral ceiling kind of frame her face here, and so I'm going to leave it just the way it is. Next thing I think I'd like to do is maybe add a floral overlay over top of this curtain to change it in from this basic brown kind of curtain into something a little bit more interesting. So once again, we'll go into File and Place Embedded. And then instead of the Painterly Inspired collection, I'm going to go to the florals from the Imaginator Studio, and I'm going to go through and browse the different options. You can see there's a lot of old master style floral paintings. I kind of like this one here, but let's see what else we have. We have some different patterns and all sorts of different options. But yeah, I think I'm going to go back up here, and I think we're going to choose this nice close-up picture. Let's see how this looks. So we can go ahead and double click to place it in our image. I'm going to pull it over here, maybe make it a little bit smaller. And we're going to place it roughly over top of that curtain. I always like to look where my leading lines in my digital background are intersecting with my subject in the photo, just to make sure you don't have any kind of strange lines coming in and out of her body. And I think this is pretty good here. These lines kind of lead in and connect into her eye line, so I think that makes sense. And so I'm just going to press enter, and I think then next is what we will do is, again, we're going to change our blend mode from this background from normal, and we'll go down into either overlay or soft light. I think we'll choose, let's go with soft light. It's a little bit punchier, and you can see how it kind of just overlays that pattern on top of the curtains, but it's a little bit bright. So let's pull our opacity down here to something in the 40, where are we at? 43%. I think that looks great. So this is on soft light at 43%, and that gives us that nice kind of floral texture to the curtain. If you really wanted to be nitpicky, you could go in and you could actually kind of warp and liquefy the flowers on the background to match the grooves in the curtain. But for the sake of this demonstration, I think I'm going to leave it like that. The only thing I'm noticing is this floral background adds, it's kind of a little bit too red or pinky. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to add a hue and saturation layer. And I'm just going to click this little button, which is going to clip that hue and saturation layer just to my floral background, so that whatever changes I make here in this hue and saturation adjustment layer are only going to affect the layer directly below it, which is the floral overlay that we put onto our curtain. So here we go. We can just simply drag our sliders and it's going to change the color there of that background layer. And I'm going to go and kind of match it up to the background. So it's probably play with our saturation a little bit as well. Actually, no, I think I'll leave the saturation there. And maybe somewhere in there. It looks pretty good. Just to make that blend in. You could go right into the reds and kind of match it to her lipstick or something like that, but I'm going for more of a kind of monochromatic feel here in the background. So let's leave it about there, and that looks pretty good. One of the other things that I'll sometimes use digital backgrounds or texture overlays for is to actually change the color tones or add a color tone layer to my image. And by doing that, it can also help to blend your different layers that you've composited in and add a nice overall effect. So I'm going to just click on the top of my stack here because I want this color overlay layer to apply to everything below it in the image. I'm going to go here into place embedded, and I'm going to stay in the floral inspired collection. But I'm going to go right down to the end, and you have a bunch of these kind of blurry color layers, and they can be used to add a color toning effect. So we have a few different ones here. So I think I'm going to choose maybe something in this. It's got some warm colors here as well as some purple tones. Let's see what this one looks like. So we're just going to add that, make it a little bit larger so it covers our entire image. And we'll just press enter. And then is what we're going to do is, once again, we're going to change our blend mode. But I think this time we'll go here and we'll use multiply. And that's going to darken the image. It's going to take these colors here and it's going to use them for a darkening effect. And so that kind of adds that kind of warm vintage feel to the image itself. We can reduce the opacity a little, maybe down to about 70%. And you can see how that's just added a nice warm touch and created a really nice vintage feel to our image itself. Now, one thing that sometimes will happen when you're applying a layer for color toning and using multiply is it's going to darken everything up, and we've kind of lost those highlights in our subject, you know, on her cheekbone and the side of her arms here, things like that. So we want to add those highlights back in. Traditionally, when we're doing a fine art portrait retouch, we might go in and we'd use what's called dodge and burning to do that. But I want to show you a really neat shortcut. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a curves layer. And the curves layer is here. We're just going to grab the center of the curves layer and pull up in the middle to brighten the image, and you can see that's brightened it. But I don't want to brighten the entire image. I just want to brighten our highlight areas. So what I'm going to do on this curves layer is I'm just going to double click the layer itself, and that's going to open up our layer style panel. So within this layer style panel, there's a whole lot of different things you can do, but what we're interested in is this blend if. So blend if is going to blend our different layers in different ways. For this, we're going to choose the underlying layer and we're going to drag the darks up, and we're going to, you can kind of see how it's Just adding, it's really adding the highlight there, and it's looking a little bit rough. You don't have very smooth edges here on the highlights themselves. So is what we want to do is we want to hold down Alt on a PC or Option on a Mac, and then you can click here and it's going to split our dark slider here, and you're going to pull up on the highlight end of it, and you're going to pull down on the dark end of it, and you can see, if you're just looking at those highlights there, see how it just kind of smooths out that transition? And you're just going to play with it until you get a natural feel, and that looks pretty good. You can also change it from your blend mode. Instead of normal, you can also go to soft light, which creates some different effects as well. But I think we'll just click it on normal there and say okay. And so that's with it off and on, and it's a very subtle effect, but it's just adding a little bit of punch to those areas that are already highlighted in our image. Now, perhaps we want to add a little bit of a vignette around the edges of our image. So I like to do my vignettes by hand. I'm going to add a new layer to my layer stack. I'm going to go into our multiply blend mode, and again I'm going to choose one of the colors in the image itself. So let's go for, again, maybe this dark brown, and go to our paintbrush. Let's keep it on the flow of 22% is perfect. So doing this, we can just go around and we can kind of hand paint a vignette around our image to kind of draw attention to our subject and maybe darken down a little so the light is, causing a little fall off here at the base of our image. And that looks pretty good. I might darken this down a little bit up here as well. And then you can see that different effect there, how it just kind of creates a natural sort of vignette around our image itself. So I think that looks pretty good. Let's just group these all together and you can see the difference. So we started off here with our stock image, and then we added our digital backgrounds and color toning and ended up here.